Good morning, class. Once again, thank you very much for this particular time that we are going to have a class. Hope you have had a very good week. Last week when we met, I discussed a number of issues with you on literature referencing, and previously we had discussed how to select a topic, how to find literature, and how to write your literature review. Today, our focus is to look into, our core focus was to look at research theory and the relevance of theory and research frameworks in research. But since you are already working on your research proposals, I jumped that to go to chapter 8 to talk about the research proposal so that next week I can go back and then teach on research theory and then continue on research data collection and then finalize it with um, how to be able to analyze qualitative data. So these are the things that we'll be doing for the rest of the session. So today our focus is on the research proposal. So I'm hoping that we'll have a very good time like we had last week. And I pray that you will be attentive and listen and then be interactive and post your questions in the chat room and I'll try to answer you. So let's see what we want to do today. The research proposal tends to be kind of a document that establishes what you are going to do in your research work. So your supervisor expects you to submit one. What I'll try to do today is to try to cover what are the components of the research proposal. And then later on, when we come back again and we at the end of the session, at the end of the semester, we'll come back and do how to conclude the research study and how to write an abstract. So we are looking at chapter 8 of the book, and we'll be discussing the components of the research proposal, topic 1. So as I mentioned, a research proposal is literally a written academic contract, though not legal, but between the researcher or the student and the research supervisor, detailing what you want to study, how you want to study it, and then how you are going to analyze it, and where you even collect your data from. One thing that I'll try to do is to also let you understand that the research proposal is important because when you start the research endeavor, it gives you a direction of where you are going. So if your supervisor accepts your research proposal, he has kind of agreed on what is his expectations for your work. Though it is not a full blueprint, it gives an indication of what you want to do so that your supervisor can even advise on what you have not looked into, how to refine your questions, how to better structure your research problem so that you can end up coming up with something very original and unique to contribute to academic work. I remember, good morning, Anita. I remember I mentioned that I would look into teaching you common errors in writing, which I think I'll come back to that later as we understand the research proposal and other aspects of the work. Okay, so that's what we will try to do today. Okay, so the proposal is not a fixed blueprint. It's in writing the manuscript. In writing the manuscript, the researcher is expected to most likely discover things that were not anticipated in the proposal, but which may be need to incorporated in the research. So the supervisor is someone who will point out after reading the research proposal that these parts tend to be missing in your research proposal. So go back and put this into them. So that's what you will see that the researcher will end up doing. Okay, so I would advise that as you start your research journey, note that the research proposal is what sometimes some departments use to even guide in selecting your research supervisor. So don't take it for granted. I want you to take it as a serious, important document that you need to use, as an important document that you need to use. Okay, so let's continue from there. The research proposal is related to the chapter 1. The research proposal has the research background, the research problem, the research purpose, the research objectives, questions, significance of the research, literature review, methodology, that's the proposed methodology you're going to use, the limitations, the project schedule, and the chapter outline. Then your references can come up. But if you look at what you are expected to do in your chapter 1 of your long essay, you have similar sections like the research background, the research problem, research purpose, objectives, and questions. Okay, so when your chapter 1 gets accepted by your supervisor, you don't need to bring in he may tell you to move the proposed research methodology to the actual chapter called methodology. So that may go off. And then the significance of the research limitations. That research limitations also, when you finish the whole entire study, the supervisor may tell you to move it to the conclusion of your work, your concluding chapter. But at the beginning, maybe at the chapter 1. But when you finish, your supervisor will tell you to move it to the conclusion of the work. So you have the research background, problem, purpose, objectives, questions, significance, and then chapter outline. Those are the things that will be left in your chapter 1. But if you compare that to your research proposal, you can see from my screen without even doing much evaluation with it. You can see from the screen here that the research proposal, if it's accepted by your supervisor, you have voila, written your chapter 1. So you can just move sections of the research proposal to make your chapter 1. That's what I wanted you to understand. The research proposal, when accepted by your supervisor, then becomes just your chapter 1. Okay, so let's continue from there. Okay. So now, what are the components of research proposal? The components are background, problem, purpose, objectives, questions, significance of the research, literature review, methodology, limitations, project schedule, and chapter outline. Every good research proposal for a PhD program, for a master's program, for you want to apply to maybe Harvard University, and you're supposed to present the research proposal, you may be required to do that. Okay. This is different from a grant proposal. A grant proposal, you need to add your budget and the significance of the study to the person granting you the research, granting you the money. Okay. So what is in the research background? Okay, so your research background is a background to the research. Someone is saying, Prof, you are repeating the same thing. Yes, I'm repeating the same thing because the research background is an introduction to the research phenomenon you are trying to research on. You are going to tell us about the current discourse or trends or views concerning the social phenomena. You don't necessarily have to explicitly state a question, but you can imply an argument that there's a need to look into something. Most often, researchers try to write a research background by characterizing it or showcasing industry statistics or world perspectives from of the phenomenon, or sometimes certain questions being asked by practitioners and sometimes policymakers and pressing concerns of the world, certain pressing concerns of the world industry, or new trends that is worth looking into. An author can do a combination of these things. In the work that he's presenting as the research background. An author can do a combination of these things in his work that he's presenting. So let's take an example. Now, this is a paper that we began looking at the earlier time when we were discussing literature review. Triggers of entrepreneurship among creative consumers from the Journal of Business Research, a very good journal that is published by Science Elsevier, and it can be found in the Science Direct, so you can go there and look at it. Look at that journal, Journal of Business Research, very, very good journal. It's a tier 3 journal. You have got tier 4 journals, tier 3, tier 2, tier 1. So the higher you go, the better it is. So tier 3, tier 4 are very highly ranked journals. Okay, so let's look at this tier 3 journal article. I am Gary Fisher. I've been called the founding father of mountain biking. I don't know about that, but I do know I love this. I love bikes, riding them, building them, making them better. Cross bikes, mountain bikes, town bikes, bikes for fun, for transport, for everything. I love them all. In the late 1970s, Fisher wanted a bike he could ride off the road, away from cops, cars, and concrete. He went on to develop a new genre of biking. Later, he decided to go into business and created a bicycle company called Mountain Bikes. Okay. Similarly, during his spare time, Mark Gregory invented a new non-stick material for fishing, Teflon. His wife suggested he might coat her set of cooking pans to make washing up easier. After registering a patent, Gregory decided to sell the idea to manufacturers. but they took no notice of him. At this point, he subsequently decided to produce non-stick cookware and create his own firm, Tefal, which became part of the global group SEB. Both Fisher and Gregory's anecdotal cases are striking illustrations of the phenomenon of user entrepreneurship. So do you realize that he has used scenarios in the industry to showcase what he's going to talk about? That is user entrepreneurship. User entrepreneurship describes a new venture creation and commercialization of a new product or service by an individual or group of individuals who are also users of the product or service and who experience a need for improvement. This need can be related to a job that's professional user entrepreneurs and or personal use and user entrepreneurs. Okay, so he has explained user entrepreneurship here. He has been able to point out what it is about user entrepreneurship. He has given examples of it. This is an extract from a research background, or from an introduction of the paper. So what you see here is that the student himself, the author has been able to introduce the concept about creative consumers or end user entrepreneurship, and then professional user entrepreneurship or user entrepreneurship as a new area that people should look into. So as I mentioned, when you're writing a research background, your objective is to introduce the key issue or the phenomenon that you want to research on. That's what you intend to do there. That's what you intend to do there. Okay, so let's continue and look at another example. Okay, so this is about understanding the risk, benefits. Okay, benefits and strategic alternatives of social applications in the public sector. So it starts by saying that in government, new media are capable of transforming power relationships between citizens and organizations to create a more open government. New media might even have the potential to transform current governance at city, state, and country levels. These applications facilitate openness, transparency, and democratization. Moreover, events such as the WikiLeaks affair, in which private communications between the US Secretary of State and the US diplomats were made public, point toward the fact that the concepts of open government democracy and freedom of information were being transformed by social media. So you see, he's using a recent industry challenge or problem as an illustration of what he wants to try and do in his work, social media in the public sector. Although there are many benefits and promises of social media and related technologies, several risks are associated with their use. Public and private organizations are using social media to communicate with citizens and customers with different results, and not necessarily as a component of a long-term strategy. Many organizations have adopted social media following a trial and error approach at the expense of several organizational resources. For instance, an exploration of Mexican states' use of social media shows that only about 400,000 citizens out of the 100 million are exchanging information with their state governments. Okay, moreover, this same study shows that 60%, 20% of Mexican states discontinued their use of Twitter or Facebook during the last year. Social media is still a new technology that needs to be better understood in terms of its benefits, risks, barriers, and strategic use. If you look at the title, he has been able to emphasize the title by the time he gets to the end of the write-up here. And here, what he has tried to do is to try to make a case to look into the risks, benefits, and strategic alternatives or strategies in managing social media in public sector. So he pointed out about the challenges and the risks that's associated with social media, and then looked at that one from the US and then looked at another one from Mexico, and then was able to narrow down by saying that it's still a new technology that needs to be better understood, especially in its use in the public sector. So the objective here of the researcher was to try and introduce why social media in the public sector, even though it has some potential benefits, also comes with some risk and also comes from the need of looking into strategic issues of how to be able to use it. So that's what he has been able to try to do. So a good background will try to use statistics, will try to use industry occurrences or recent issues in industry to be able to inform why this research area is important. If you look at what we have here, the statistics are coming from Mexico, and then you also see that he used some story from the US. So he has combined them together in a particular write-up. Remember I told you that you can write methodologically where you compare two geographic regions. So this person then wrote something from the US, and then later in the next paragraph, he compared this similar phenomenon in a developing or emerging economy, Mexico. So you can see the two working together. Okay, now let's look at the last example. Online relationship marketing and customer loyalty, a signaling theory perspective. Okay, so research background. It's become increasingly important for firms to build relationships with their customers and other key stakeholders in industries which they operate. This can be attributed in part to the advent of new forms of technology and the ability to alter the nature of relationships and the way they are developed between firms and their stakeholders. Relationship marketing as a strategy contributes immensely to the firm's value proposition within the marketplace. It fosters partnerships, which ultimately lead to profitable exchanges that help firms to acquire, retain, and adequately satisfy customers. But technological advances are affecting customer expectations. Okay, so now look at where the but comes. Their needs and wants are constantly evolving. And as a result, marketers must frequently evaluate marketers, so practitioners. Yeah, I mentioned that a good background will also try to point out the questions that practitioners are asking. Remember I mentioned that. As a result, marketers must frequently evaluate their methods to keep up with the emerging trends. Okay. Although businesses all over the globe are leveraging new emerging technologies like emails, Web 2.0, and mobiles in existing relationships, and enhancing existing relationships, as well as creating new channels for interaction in their customers, there is the need for extensive research regarding this phenomenon. In fact, the last paragraph flows into the research problem. So, but this is coming from a paper. So they usually combine a paper, they combine both the background and problem in one section called the introduction of the paper. So that's why you see a little bit of that coming. But at least it gives you an idea of what I was telling you. There is you try to look at introduce the thematic area you're trying to research on, the phenomenon you're trying to research on. Try to make a case of why that phenomenon seems to be important to look into and what needs to be looked into. That's what it has done. That's what it has done here. Okay. So now we can continue. Okay. Anita, I hope you can hear me now. So the next thing that we have is the research problem. The research problem tries to emphasize a situation in need of a solution, improvement, and then alteration, or a discrepancy between the way things are and the way things ought to be. A research problem simply communicates the research gaps so that you can be able to define your research purpose. The research problems define your research gaps, which then becomes the bedrock for the research purpose. Okay. The research problem defines the research gaps in a succinct way so that it can be able to become the bedrock of your research purpose and your research objectives and then research questions. Okay, so what is happening is that in the research problem, you end up realizing because the problem is from the research. You see, the background, the problem is from the industry. The research problem, the problem is from the research. So you establish the research background to be able to introduce what is important to look into from the industry perspective or from the current discourse in society, or from what practitioners are even pointing out that we should look into, or policymakers are pointing out to look into. Then when you finish that, you have to also use that you saw that we are using references to buttress our arguments. When you go to the research problem, now it's quite different. Your objective here is now to look at what the issue that I'm studying. Perhaps the issues about online relationship marketing. Perhaps the issues about social media use in the public sector. Perhaps the issue is about user entrepreneurship. I need to check what does the literature say about that area I want to research on. what does literature say about that area? So every good research problem will have a statement that depicts that the person is reflecting on existing research. Every research problem will have a section, a sentence, and a part of the work that depicts that the person is actually referring to the existing research. We don't expect you to present a research problem that doesn't have a section that emphasizes that the person or the author is reflecting on the existing research. So you are going to look out for statements and words when that depicts that you are reviewing existing research. If you take your research problem and you look at it and there is no existing research there, you don't have a research problem. Whether you call it statement of the problem or you call it research rationale, what you are trying to emphasize here is that the problem you are going to research on, where is it coming from? You have told about the phenomenon or part of the problem from industry in the background. But now, what research has been done on the area? What have been the previous work that have tried to shape that particular concept? And what has been done so far? So when we look at the research problem, we need to know what has been done, what seems to be missing, and why it is important to address those research gaps. So that's what we try to communicate. The latter part, sometimes people don't make it very clear, but it's also important. But what has been done, what seems to be missing, and why what is missing is important to look into. Okay. So let's look at here. Okay. Now, because we are drawing from academic papers, most of them, when they write their research problem, it leads them to write their research papers. So you see that I have saying that research problem leading to research paper, so that you can see the relationship between the two. Okay. But in your long essay, you write the research problem, then you have another section just after the research problem called the research papers. I just want you to know that. Okay. Now, empirical studies have shown that 10.7% of all startups and 46.6% of innovative startups that survived to their 5th year, created in the United States in 2004, were founded by users. Okay, that's interesting. So that means that they were founded by user entrepreneurship. Other studies find 29% of US-based medical device startups and 84% of large and small firms in the juvenile product industries, that's 263 firms created between 1980 to 2000 and 2007, and then were founded by users, physicians in the first case, and then parents, babysitters, and caregivers in the second case. Okay, so it has made giving you some statistics to showcase that and from the empirical works, empirical studies are previous research, previous research that has data, have attempted to do these things. Okay, and I've pointed out that user entrepreneurship tends to matter. Now, over the past 10 years, please forgive me for not having a Y here. Over the past 10 years, the empirical patterns highlighted the magnitude and importance of entrepreneurship for the industrial system. However, as firm founders, end users, in contrast with professional users, remain relatively unexplored by scholars, even though the Kaufman survey conducted among a sample of 5,000 startups launched in 2004 showed that 40% of user entrepreneurial firms were created by end user entrepreneurs. Now, what has it done? It is trying to point out that even though there is there are a lot of discussions on empirical patterns to highlight the importance of user entrepreneurship, nobody is studying end user entrepreneurship. In fact, if you look at the two, if you go back to the research background, it pointed out there are two types. There is those who are professional end users and those who are end user entrepreneurs. This one is more about those who are using the technology for their personal use, like the example we saw here. So what the author is writing is that in reference to the research problem, what the author is trying to write, this exploratory study focuses exclusively on consumer entrepreneurs and aims to extend their knowledge, our knowledge on this unconventional but growing form of production. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the research problem. That now is going to start the research paper. So look at what is happening here. More precisely, we aim to shed light on why, in some cases, innovative consumers, that the end user entrepreneur, decides to diffuse and commercialize a solution which they have developed for their own use or personal use, by creating their own business and starting a for-profit company, like by creating their own business and starting a for-profit company. Okay. So we see here that this is the purpose of the work that he wants to do. The purpose of the work he wants to do. Okay. Now let's look at the other example that we had. Online relationship marketing. So although the businesses all over the globe are leveraging new and emerging technologies like emails and Web 2.0 tools and mobiles in enhancing relationships as well as creating new channels of interaction with customers, there is a need for extensive research regarding this phenomenon. Researchers such as Ghazi et al. And Hung and Shah opine that there is limited research on firms' relationship marketing activities online and how it influences the relationship marketing outcomes. For instance, some firms, you see, he put an argument there, now he's doing an illustration. Remember I told you about the argument, evidence, illustration. So the argument came, now he's not going to do an illustration. For instance, some scholars have postulated the relevance of studying the incorporation of relationship marketing activities online with other organizational practices and outcomes to the advancement of existing knowledge on the role and potential of internet technology in RM or in relationship marketing. Okay. Furthermore, there is also the need for more theorization in understanding the relationship between online variables and relationship marketing constructs. That conceptual link tends to be silent in extant or existing online relationship marketing research. So he has pointed out two gaps here. One of them has to do with an issue gap that points out that there is limited research on online, the relationship marketing activities of firms online, and then how it influences the outcomes of relationship marketing, like loyalty, like satisfaction. For instance, some scholars have postulated the relevance of studying the incorporation of the relationship marketing activities online with other organizational practices. Should we just do relationship marketing online, or we should interface it with other organizational practices? That's the question he's asking. Then he said that furthermore, there's a need for more theorization. What is he trying to say is that most of the studies on online relationship marketing do not have used theories. And theories help us to better understand society that we are in so that we can establish other standards that others can emulate. And the theories also help us to be able to compare one study with another study, and then be able to come up with an understanding of how something works. Okay, so that somebody else in a different context can apply it. Okay, but we don't have, they say there's lax theorization. Okay, and that is an important point that needs to be addressed. Okay, thus the purpose of the study is to examine the influence of ORM of online relationship marketing activities, namely engagement and interactivity on customer loyalty, as mediated by online trust within the banking industry. Now, if you continue reading on, it tells you that this study will be done from a signaling theory perspective. You see, because he said that there's the need for more theorization, the title of the paper has theory in it, so that he realizes that he's addressing the gap. Sometimes, I remember I told you that when you're coming out with a research title, it's not just about the topic you want to research on or the country you want to research on, but also your potential contribution. What contribution are you bringing? This paper, the contribution is the fact that he's responding to research on online relationship marketing from a theoretical perspective using the signaling theory as his guideline. Okay. So he states the purpose of the study, and that is made very clear. Now, let's look at the last one. Okay, last but one then. Understanding risk, benefits, strategic alternatives of social media application in the public sector. This is the research problem leading to research purpose. So the adoption of social media by governments confronts a series of barriers. Some of these barriers relate to records management, privacy and security issues, accuracy and administration specific requirements. And social media includes two-way communications. The risk of inserting malware into government websites exists. So the IT people should prepare to protect government information technology infrastructure. Government that would like to implement social media need to verify if the people in the charge of updating the media will have the time to update the new communication channel. They will also need to answer the questions such as what to post, how and often they will post. The lack of resources and procedures could undermine the accuracy of the information posted on social media. Okay. So this part, just the first paragraph introduces the barriers or the challenges of using social media in the public sector. Then goes on to say, although the use of social media in Mexican state portals is recent, the development of relationship between government and citizens is growing fast. However, in contrast with other countries, so you're telling you about a context gap. In contrast with other countries, to our knowledge, there is still no guideline for the use of social media in Mexico. Okay. So the study of perceived risks and strategies will be very helpful in the development of those guidelines. So if you look at it very carefully, then it goes to the purpose. This study seeks to explore perceived risks and benefits of social media among public servants from Mexico, and especially the strategic elements to include social media in e-government policy and as a communication channel with citizens. Okay, so what you see here is the student or the author trying to write and make a case for social media applications in the public sector. They need to do research in that area. So he has pointed out what type of research he's supposed to do. He wants to explore the perceived risks and benefits of social media. And then he looks at how the strategic elements that will be needed, what strategic elements will be needed to include in social media in e-government policy and as a communication channel with citizens. Okay. Now, the last example of the research problem is this one that we did earlier on corporate governance and financing decisions of Ghanaian listed firms. So the first part tries to present the gaps in corporate governance studies. So corporate governance has been identified in previous studies. So all of it, you see that it runs through the four examples that you can see that they are all emphasizing on the previous studies. The reason is that to be able to define the research problem, then you should know, to be able to define the research problem, you should know the gaps that exist in the current research area that you are intend to research on. Okay. So this one, it goes on to say that these empirical studies tended to focus mainly on developed economies with inconclusive results. So that tells you about a gap. There's too much studies on developed economies, and even that one is inconclusive. Very little, however, has been done on corporate governance in Sub-Saharan Africa, especially with respect to firms financing decisions. Okay. In Ghana, for instance, economic development and restructuring have introduced modern forms of business activity and diverse financing structures, like the Ghana Stock Exchange in the past 2 decades. Thus, firms are being exposed to more financing options than previously. It is therefore crucial to determine how current issues in corporate governance affect the financing decisions of Ghanaian firms. This paper, now the purpose, specifically examines the relation between the various variables of corporate governance and the capital structure decisions of firms listed on Ghana Stock Exchange during the 6-year period. So from there, we go to research purpose. Remember, the research background is looking more about introducing the phenomenon of study and then using some statistics and industry accounting to try to emphasize on what is necessary. The research problem will look at academic work that has been done on the area and why that academic work, what the academic work says it needs to be done. Okay. Now, when you go to research purpose, it's a concise, clear statement on the specific goal of the study. The purpose includes the variables, the population, and setting of the study. Okay, so with the first one, triggers of entrepreneurship among creative consumers. The study aims to shed light on why, in some cases, innovative consumers tend to diffuse and commercialize a solution they develop for their own by creating their own businesses and starting a for-profit company. So what you see here is a statement coming up, and that statement is what is coming as up as the purpose of the study. Now, if you look at the second one, the purpose of the study is to examine the influence of online relationship marketing activities on customer loyalty as mediated by online trust with the banking industry. Okay. So you end up writing your research background, and then after that, you write your research problem, then you write your research purpose. The purpose should tie in the problem with the title of the work. So when you look at the title of the work, you should see elements of it in the purpose. In the purpose. Okay. Now, because it's a concise statement, I want to show you a different example. So the other one on social networking in the workplace in Mexico, this is what you said. This study seeks to explore the perceived risks and benefits of social media among public servants from Mexico, especially the strategic elements include in a social media, and especially the strategic elements include in the social media in e-government policy and as a communication channel with the citizens. Remember, he says he's looking at strategic guidelines, perceived risks and benefits of social media. So he's going to see how what strategic elements or guidelines can be incorporated into any social media for government policy, and then also as a communication channel with citizens. Then you have a corporate governance and financing decision by near listed firms, which I mentioned earlier. So, what is the difference? Hassan, this question, I don't think I should answer you. What is the difference between a research title and research problem? Oh, Hassan, you have a title. Look at the title here. Can't you see what the title is? Even let me go back to research problem. This is a title, and this is a problem. So if you look at it, the problem is an essay. You are writing a problem and describing it. The title is just a statement that tells you what you are going to do. When we look at the earlier chapter, please go back and watch the videos on chapter 2, the one about how to select a topic and then and how to identify research gaps. There's a section in which I was teaching, and if you have the book, it is also inside. There's a section in which I was teaching in the video in the book, and I was explaining the research title as an equation is equal to the topic plus the scope and context plus the potential contribution of the study. Potential contribution of the study. So most of the time you have the topic in there and a potential contribution of the study. What will be of value from those who are what will be the value that you are contributing to academics who are going to read in this particular work? Okay, so this is a title. This is a title. The topic here is about user entrepreneurship. The title is Triggers of User Entrepreneurship Among Creative Consumers. It tells you that the work is about creative consumers, and the topic is about user entrepreneurship. And he's trying to look at factors that influence or triggers user entrepreneurship. So that's where the contribution lies. The factor that influence or triggers. Okay. So please, I hope I've answered your question, Hassan. If you are in doubt, you know that the title is a simple sentence with a few, like a phrase, whilst your research problem will be more like an essay of about 400 words or more, depending. Okay. So you have a clear, concise statement on a specific goal or aim. That's your purpose. And the purpose includes the variables, population, and setting for the study. Okay. The same thing. The purpose of the study is to understand what of who and what involving whom or what from when to which purpose. So usually when you're defining a research purpose, you end up telling us the what issues, the whom issues, and then the when issues. So from there, we go to the research problem, to the research purpose, then we go to the research objective, more specific focus statements and questions that communicate in greater detail the nature of the study. So we break down the research purpose to objectives. For example, this one, the purpose was about to understand why some firms some innovative consumers decide to diffuse and commercialize a solution. So if you look at the objective, the first one to explore the mechanisms that trigger creative consumers to become entrepreneurs. That is like addressing the title of the paper. Then second one, to explore the pathways of end user entrepreneurship. How did they go? What part did they take place? Did they use? And lastly, to explore the favorable times or periods of life for end user entrepreneurships to entrepreneurs to undertake entrepreneurial ventures. So what you're saying here is that what times are favorable for user and creative consumers um, to become entrepreneurs or professional entrepreneurs. Okay. So to explore favorable times and periods for the end users who then become end user entrepreneurs and later could also commercialize it for commercial value. At the time that they are end user entrepreneurs, their objective is to just create it for themselves for personal use. Then after some time, they move towards a level that they will try to commercialize it for others to use it. Okay. Can you please, is the aim and purpose the same thing? Okay, very, very good question. Please, now let me point out something. In certain universities, you have words like research objective, principal objective, specific objectives, some contributory objectives, and some of them have got research aim, research purpose, core research objective. Now, all we are trying to say, the purpose is the general objective of the study, what you want to do, without breaking it down, what do you want to achieve by the time you read your work. So, and it's usually the aim of the study too. Somebody call it the aim of the study. What do you want to do? Because the purpose is giving a direction. However, the research, um, problem will tell us where the problem is, and the purpose will tell us out of the problem, which of them are we trying to address. But when you get to the research objectives, your objective here is to break down the research purpose into deliverables that will come together to address the purpose. So sometimes some people say that the research objectives is the doing words of the purpose, or are the doing words of the purpose. So it tells us that these are the actions we are going to take so that we address the purpose. So when we look at your actions in the research objectives, by the time we finish, we should have been able to address the purpose. The purpose tells us generally where are we going and what do we intend to achieve. Then the objectives will tell us step-by-step activities that we need to do to be able to achieve that. Then the research question will then tell us step-by-step questions we should ask so that we can achieve the objectives and then achieve the purpose. You see the relationship? The purpose tells us that I am going to Kumasi. Okay. The objective will tell us that I first need to understand how much money do I have. Then which route am I using? Then what time am I leaving? Or why am I going? Which route am I using? And what time am I leaving? So when I put these three together, I can be able to tell myself that I'm going to Kumasi. So that is what it's going to do. So your purpose is the general concept or aim that you are saying, as you posted, which is derived from your research problem. Now, when you look at your problem, there are gaps, and your research background, there are gaps. So the plenty gaps you have pointed out to us, which of them do you intend to address? So what you intend to address will then tell us where you are going. That is why the question that Hassan asks, not Hassan, okay, no, let me, the question that Ike Chuku asks is very, very important. When you have a purpose, you should go back and check that your title of your work has a relationship with your purpose. Sometimes our students have a beginning title, tentative title, and they go on. They finish the purpose, they do objectives, but they fail to check whether the current objectives and purpose you have, does it have a relationship with the title that you created in the beginning? Because by the time you come up with the purpose and objectives, some of the things you said you wanted to, you put in your title may not be relevant or maybe relevant or maybe irrelevant. So you may need to change it or adapt it a little bit so that it can fit the purpose. So when I look at your title, I look at your paper, I can see there's a relationship between the two. Okay. Now somebody is asking that, Prof, is there, and Kenneth, your index number, your surname is not given to us. Please, you need to edit your name and add your index number and your surname to the name that you have there as Kenneth. Okay, I'm just telling you to do so. So Kenneth, let me call you Kenneth. Trump. So Kenneth Trump is asking us a question that do we need to add to your objective all the time? No, it's because it's just a sentence I'm trying to write. Somebody can just say that the objectives of the study are A. I want the study the study will explore this, the study will do this, the study will do that. It depends on what you want to write. But this is much more of an action statement. That's why you are seeing them that, so you can adapt to it. You can adapt to it. It's the way this one is written to explore, examine the mechanisms that creative consumers that trigger creative consumers to become entrepreneurs, to explore the pathways of end user entrepreneurship, and to explore favorable times. But I will just advise you that currently, because of the kind of university you are in, whenever you are stating, this is from an academic paper, but when you are doing for a long essay, you have to let us know where it is coming from. So you end up saying something like this: to explore the mechanisms that trigger creative consumers in Ghana to become entrepreneurs. So you have to give it a context, or maybe creative consumers in, maybe if you're looking at a particular industry, in agricultural industry to become entrepreneurs, or the Ghanaian agricultural industry to become entrepreneurs. So there has to be a context placed in the objective. Sometimes it's very, very important. Sometimes very, very important. I'm just letting you understand now. This is a general paper, no written, so it doesn't have it. So don't be surprised if you see another one that has it. Okay, so let's look at another one. This gentleman is doing a study on mandated drug testing programs in high school. The case study of a Ghanaian high school. Okay, I'll come to it. Okay, the purpose of the study is to investigate the attitudes of high school students to mandated drug testing programs in Kwewu Senior High School. Objectives: to explore the nature of adoption of the mandated drug testing program by Kwewu Senior High School. So the nature will describe what type of mandated drug testing is taking place, when does it take place, to give us some descriptive understanding of what happens in the mandated drug testing programs. The second one, to explore the differences between males and female, or gender differences toward the mandated drug testing programs. Okay, so what you see here is a little bit different. So now you have what two objectives coming out of the papers. Somebody is asking us, so do we have two objectives for every purpose or three objectives? Okay. In fact, there's no general statement that tells you should use two or three, or even use one. But this is my advice for you. For every good long essay, it is advisable that you don't go above three, in my view. The reason is that, especially, I'm saying long essay, especially because sometimes when you put in more than three, you end up doing more work because you have to answer each of the objectives. So, and that could be a lot of work. It's not, you can't just say, yeah, the objectives are not yes and no answers. They should have some relative complexity about them. So you have to note that you can't just make them as simple statements. Hence, you have to try and make sure that you choose objectives that tend to matter. But you could have three, or you can have two. You can even have more. But I'm just advising you do a maximum of three. Now, sometimes a lecturer can have two. But when he has questions, he may have not two questions, he may end up having four questions, because he can break the objectives into sub-objectives and then use them in the questionnaire. Use them in the research question, use them in the research question. So let me just let's look at an example. Okay. This one is about social networking in Mexico. So let's look at the purpose very well. And identify the key things we need to do to address the purpose. First of all, he said the study seeks to explore the perceived risk and benefits of social media among public servants in Mexico. So that gives you the first objective. So you can say that your objective is to, first of all, explore the potential benefits and perceived risk of using social media in Mexico, Mexican government. But the guy realized that benefits are different from risk. So let me separate the two. So I have benefits as a different thing and risk as a different thing. Why? When we go back to the research background, this is the research background that the guy wrote. If you look at the research background, look at it. In government, new media is capable of transforming power relationship between citizens and organizations to create a more open government. New media might even have the potential to transform current governance system at the city, state, or country levels. These applications can facilitate or generate these benefits: openness, transparency, and democratization. So the benefits itself, there can be three types of them: openness, transparency, and democratization. Then it goes on to the research problem. The research problem related to it. The adoption of social media in government confronts a series of barriers. One, records management, privacy and security issues, accuracy and administration specific requirement. The barriers and risks is also four. Yes, listed here. So why will he try to combine all of them into one objective? No, he won't do that. He will split them up. So when you look at the research background, the research problem, the benefits are three type of potential benefits, and the risk can be about four or even more if you look at what he mentioned concerning WikiLeaks and then what happened on the U.S. Secretary of State. It could also make it more difficult. So please, you have to look at it carefully before you say you're doing 3 or 2. If you look at this one, you could have just said benefits, and if you say benefits and risks together, that means that when you get to the research question part, you have to split them up so that they can stand on each on their own. Please, Edna, I've just answered this question. There's nothing like a maximum number of objectives to be stated. What I mean is look at your work, but I'm also advising that for a long essay that is being done by an MBA student, don't go above 3. Or else you see, every objective you have to answer it. Every objective you put there, you have to answer it. So if you have too many objectives, you are going to have a very long work, a very long engagement in your analysis and your discussion. And sometimes some of the objectives, I'll come to how to formulate objectives and questions, and then you understand what I'm trying to say. So please hold on. Okay, so the third one was about here, especially strategic elements. So listen carefully. Look at the objectives look at the purpose you have, and use the objectives to break down the purpose. Or look at the research problem you have and use the objective to break down the research problem. So when we look at the objectives, we can see that, oh, this is addressing one of the gaps we found. This is also addressing one of the gaps we found. And this is also addressing one of the gaps we found. So there is nothing like what is the maximum. You should ask yourself, which of the gaps are you addressing? When you put them in your purpose, what do you need to put together to address the purpose and address the gaps? So sometimes some students even put in objective that has no relationship with the purpose. He says their objective is to do perceived risk, benefits, and social media among public servants in Mexico. Then you say he will write an objective like to explore whether public servants fear social media. There was nothing about fearing social media here. To explore why public servants have abandoned social media. Nothing was mentioned here about abandoning social media by public servants. So you should be very careful how you state your objective. It has to have a relationship with the purpose and relationship with your research problem. Now, let me point out, those of you who are going to Harvard and MIT and have to go and do your PhD after this, let me help you here. You see, when you are doing your objectives, when you're going to Penn State, and somebody said, I'm not mentioning university. Okay, you're going to Penn State. Yes, you're going to Penn State. So those of you are going to Penn State and going to my beloved University of Manchester and maybe Imperial College, what you need to do is note that when you want to write it at the PhD level or at a higher level, whenever you finish your objective, ask yourself, which gap is objective 1 addressing? Or which gap is objective 2 addressing or contributing to address? And which gap is objective 3 addressing? So I tell students that to do a very good job, make sure that by the time you finish your objectives, the gaps that they are addressing are clear. So sometimes if you write that, when you write state objective, tell us this objective, by answering this objective, I've addressed this gap. Sometimes I tell students to do that. I'm talking about the PhD and those who are thinking about going to these universities I mentioned. If you're coming to UG2, you can look at that. But if you're going to do a PhD, and those of you are going to write proposals to take to Harvard and go and do your PhD there, this is the things I'm going to look at. When you are writing the objective, make sure that you know which gaps it's addressing. When I do this, I address this objective. Why am I addressing the objective? What will it do? If I don't address the objective, what will happen? What will happen? Now, look at what is happening here. I'm using Mexico's. Let's go back to the Mexico research problem. I'm teaching good. I'm very happy. Good. So let's look at it. I said this the Wednesday class, you are just phenomenal because of the kind of questions that you ask. You can clap for yourselves again. Okay, so look at what happened here. He says that in contrast with other countries, to our knowledge, there is still no guideline for the use of social media in Mexico. Richard, thank you too. So the study of perceived risk, benefits, and strategies will be helpful in the development of those guidelines. Now, listen to what is going to happen here. He said there's no guidelines. So we want to be able to develop guidelines. But he's saying that he's going to look at perceived risk, benefits, and strategies that can come together to help develop those guidelines. Because of what he stated at the end, look, you see, you have pointed out gaps, but what do you choose to do? Whenever you state gaps, you have to make a choice of what you want to do. His choice is that the study of perceived risk, benefits, and strategy will be helpful. So when you look at his research questions, objectives, and research purpose, they are going to tell us that he needs to address perceived risks, he needs to address the benefits, and he needs to address the strategies. Look at this one too. Okay, it is crucial to determine how current issues in corporate governance affect the financial decisions of Ghanaian firms. So, this paper specifically examines the relation between various variables of corporate governance and capital structure decisions of Ghanaian firms listed in Ghana Stock Exchange between this period. So now he's giving you a period because of the context of the type of study he's doing. Now, look at what he's trying to say. The choice he made that it is important to look at how current issues in corporate governance is affecting the financial decision of Ghanaian firms. So he's going to make a choice, study the relation between the current issue, that the various variables of corporate governance and capital structure decisions that firms financing decisions of the firms which are listed in the Ghana Stock Exchange. So the choice you make have to be related to what you say you will do. You can't present research problem without making choice. So I even tell students that when you write research problem and it's very lengthy, at the end, right, in summary, these gaps have been identified, A, B, C. You can mention them. So that when you make a choice in your research problem or research purpose, we can relate to the summary. So this is what Prof. Abo has done in the summary. Prof is a very smart guy, so you can just imagine. So said it's crucial to determine how current issues in corporate governance affect the financing decisions of Ghanaian listed firms. Okay. Now, this other one too we have here. You see, there needs to be a conceptual link. Here he talks about the fact that we should look at, more studies should look at the relationship between the practices of organizational practices of RM online and then the outcomes. Look at it. Customer loyalty is an outcome of relationship marketing. Relationship marketing activities online are engagement and interactivity. So he's looking at the two, but he's even going further to look at how it is mediated by trust. And he's doing it in the banking industry. So if you look at the purpose and you look at the top there, he said that using signaling theory perspective. So this one, you have not finished stating it. If you look at the full thing, it states it. Okay. So please, if you are talking about your research objective, I want you to know that your research objectives are focus statements that communicate in greater detail the nature of your study. Look at this. More specific than the purpose. It is more specific than the purpose, but they should relate with the purpose. I'll come to how to formulate them later. Okay, so now let me look at some questions that came up from my dear friends here. Okay, so we do research to discover, explore, understand, explain, predict, and create. Does it mean that the action verbs? Okay, this has been an argument everywhere. Yesterday I asked you, Joseph, it's like you're asking a PhD question. Depending on who is reading your work, you go with to examine. Because examine covers all of them. Examine covers explore, it covers understand, it covers describe and explain. The reason is that sometimes students are not sure whether their work is exploratory, descriptive, or explanatory. So they go with explore and examine. That is easier for them. Then they don't touch anything. And some examiners, I'm telling you, some examiners also are not very sure about it because sometimes somebody can say that my research seeks to describe something, describe the mechanisms. Or somebody said to determine the mechanism. Now, whenever you make the words, the verbs that you use there tells the depth of analysis you are going to do. The depth of analysis you are going to do. Depth of analysis you are going to do. So, for the lack of the better words, use examine, determine, and when you know you are doing exploratory, so you can just say explore. But somebody can do descriptive study and still start to explore, then move to seek to explain and to understand. So one of them will be explore, the second one can be understand, and the third one can be understand too. But I'm just telling you that because in the University of Ghana, we have a mix of different people coming from science and everything. Sometimes there's confusion on the words. So that people like to use the science-based way of doing it. What I mean by science-based, like physical sciences, examine, determine. Those ones are easy because those ones are more concrete to them. So I also advise you that to avoid turning your thesis into a whole discussion if you use the right words. If you know it's explore, you can use explore. Apart from that, go with examine and then determine. That one you can end up doing as explore, you can end up doing describe, you can end up doing predict, you can end up create. That one I'm just telling you as a friend here. You are telling me that what should I do? I'm just telling you as a friend. You see, part of what you're doing is politics. So you have to know that sometimes your supervisor will also be imposing what he knows on you, not what is the general norm. So because you also want to finish, you just listen to your supervisor so that I can finish. Anyway. Okay, so there's another question here. What is the maximum number of objectives? I've answered that. You have made it, Prof, you have made it clear that objectives should answer the gaps in the research. A very good point to note. Yes, very good point to note. Kuma, thank you very much. Rina, okay, how are you doing? Okay. Prof, please, is there a general guide in the use of abbreviations in one's research work and to what extent? Oh, it's needed. You can do abbreviations. Like you saw Dr. Schindler's work here, we have here on, I think, on RM. So you see, the first time she defines, okay, this is not the first time she did, this is the research purpose. So look at it in the research problem. The first time she uses is a relation marketing into bracket RM. So if only you are going to do that, don't let the abbreviation just spring up. You should use them, you should define them. Like, what am I defining? Let it be known that relation marketing RM, so that whenever you repeat RM, anybody can know that you are referring to relationship marketing. So please, you can do that. The same way if you're writing maybe GBC, Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, the next time you can then use GBC. So you put it in bracket. If you're writing something like, I've even seen people write corporate governance CG. And anytime they use, but it's because of the frequency of the use of the word, or the statement in that particular piece of work. Okay. So now let's go to how to go to questions, and then we look at how to formulate objectives and questions. Okay. For example, much is done on political and administrative decentralization. You found fiscal decentralization as a gap. Should the research problem be titled only fiscal decentralization or cover the types of decentralization? No reading. What I advise you to do that when you finish writing a research problem, make a choice of what you want to do and use it to state your research purpose. Then go back to your research problem, your research title, and ask yourself, how do I make it more relatable to my research purpose? That's all. How do I make it more relatable? But let me tell you something. Research purpose, research questions, and research objectives are moving goalposts. And research title, they are moving goalposts. What do I mean? Even when you have accepted what you want to do, your supervisor can tell this is the tentative, let's go ahead. When you go and do your chapter 2, chapter 3, and sometimes even when you go to the field, you may find out that some things are a little bit different. So you need to come back and change some of your research questions or objectives, or even the title. So I always tell students that until you have finished your work and reach the last full stop at a conclusion, you actually don't know your final title, or you don't know your final research questions. After you have finished writing it, you may even have to go back and tweak it a little bit so that it can link with your conclusion and make your contribution sound. This is one of the reasons why, as Daniel is pointing out here, research is very creative. I mentioned that you should have the flexibility of going forward and coming back. So there's nothing like you have finished your purpose and that will never change. Sometimes even when you are going to do your Viva, your purpose can even change again, because you realize that after I finish the work, if I state it this way, it will make my contribution much more clearer, and everybody will see that I'm contributing something better. By the time I was doing the work, my mind was a little bit more. You see, some of you, after you have read the work, you are more passionate about something. Let me give an example. A lot of the students who are sending me ideas of what they want to do for their research proposal are writing about COVID-19. And I said, all of you, because the thing is very recent, is an interesting topic to you. But there are so many problems in literature that are not yet being addressed. But all of a sudden, everybody wants to do COVID-19. Now, you're going to do COVID-19, and by the time you finish your thesis, COVID-19 is over. So some of the conclusions and the gaps you pointed out about COVID-19, and to start off, you realize that some of the things have even been addressed by the president or somebody else. So it seems you have to change your work so that you can make your work more contribute something better. So it can happen that by the time you finish, the industry has even moved on, and you have to change your research title and change your research purpose to contribute, to highlight something stronger in your work that you have done, maybe a contribution that you have pointed out. Okay. Should the researcher write in full abbreviations used after the work? Usually those ones that people do are keywords like institutions. So sometimes after you do your introduction and your list of tables, list of figures, you can run list of abbreviations. You can do that one and just, but it's primarily, most of the people do it primarily for institutional names like World Bank, UN, all those kind of key institutional names. Or maybe keywords that are quite lengthy and he has cut them short. Maybe sometimes like UNCTAD, United Nations Committee on Trade and something committee and stuff. So you end up realizing that that's a very long statement, and you may want to reduce it. You may want to reduce it. Okay. Okay. So let's continue. Okay, so I saw something here about Prof, is it always a must to work on the limitation of gap on existing research, or is it it's always showing entirely new model? Okay, it's always good to look at existing research. That is where your research, so that you can be able to point out what knowledge your work is contributing. So if you want to bring a new model, tell us why the current models are not sufficiently addressing the issue you want to look at. Hence, the new model has to be developed. And find out who supports the fact that the new model has to be developed. Are you the first person ever in the world pointing out the new model has to be developed? Then you have to check yourself. The reason why scientists like doing reflection on their past is because to be able to define that new knowledge has been created, you have to be sure that that knowledge didn't exist already. And that now this is the point of departure from existing knowledge. So this now what I'm saying is the new knowledge. Otherwise, you will end up plagiarizing what somebody has done and call it new knowledge that you have bought, even if you have not read it before. So be very careful. Science has to be reliable and accurate. So when you are doing your research, your objective is to reflect on existing knowledge so that you can be able to tell what has been done and find room for what needs to be done and why it needs to be done. Okay. Should the researcher write the abbreviations in full? Can you elaborate further on variables, population, and setting on the study? Okay. You see, what I would advising is that anytime you are writing a research problem, for example, you are writing a research papers, you should let us know the variables. When we say variables, what are the key issues you'll be looking into? Sometimes you may not state all of them. For example, Prof. Abbott didn't mention all the variables. He didn't mention any variable even here. Just say variables of corporate governance. Sometimes you can do that, depending on the work you are doing. But sometimes if the gap is it's much more concerned about specific gaps, specific variables. For example, this one, the guy was more interested in looking at, the authors were more interested in looking at perceived risks, benefits, and then strategic elements. So he stated it inside. So when you are very sure of what you're looking for, you may state inside. But when you're not sure, you may be generally say factors that influence something. Then you are going to now explore those factors. So that's the variable part. The second about population. Population is much more about the given area in which the study is going to be taken from. So the context is Ghana. The context is the setting of the study. But within the setting of the study, what is your scope? Are you looking at an industry? Are you looking at an organization? Are you looking at an institution or a division or if you remember, I had a slide that showed you how to determine scope. Go back to session 2. It's even in the book on how to be able to determine contributions. So I pointed out how did you be able to determine scope. How do you be able to determine scope? If you can actually go back, you find out, you see what I'm talking about, how to determine scope. Determine scope. Let me see if I can find that slide quickly to address it so that we can go back to what we are doing. Because we have a long way to go and most of you are asking a lot of good questions anyway. How to determine scope. I mentioned that. Okay. Okay. So I remember when I was, okay. Okay, look at this slide. This is on, and those of you who are thinking about what slide it is, this is on my determine scope and contribution. So look at it yourself. So this is on from session 3A, review literature. We did that earlier. Scope, study one part of the organization, several parts of the organization, one organization, an industry, a sector, the whole country. Contribution, the outcome of the study, the variables you are studying, the complexity of the analytical method, the methodology being used, and the novelty of the study. So this is what you see come inside. And I stated this because those of you asking, I gave you this definition, creating a research title. Topic, context, and contribution. Topic, context, and contribution. This is what I told you. See, everything now is coming back to help to emphasize what I said. Okay. Okay. So let's continue. Okay. Now, I want to go back to my slides. I'll come back to your questions. Can you, but some supervisor department will ask you, where's your model? That is about research frameworks and research theory. We'll talk about that next week. How can you tell if one perceived literature gap on which one is based has not been already identified? Look at the literature the person is quoting from, how current it is. If a person is quoting from a paper that was published in 2010 as a gap, whilst we are currently in 2020, 10 years have come. People would have done studies to address those gaps. Number two, you should also look at the issue. You see, gaps have got their weightings. Research gaps have got their weightings. Somebody may point out a gap, it might be addressed, but the specific perspective you are coming from is different from what others have done. So you have to also understand why your gap exists. You have to understand why your gap exists. Okay. So we talked about this particular one. We have breaking then the purpose down into objectives. Now let's look at a research question. The research questions are interrogated statements that focus on what variables or concepts are to be described, and then what relationship might exist among them. Okay, so the research question is just an interrogated statement, or it's just putting a question mark in a nutshell to the end of the objective. So if you state your objectives very well, the research questions will just emanate very easily. If you state your objectives very well, your research questions will just emanate very easily. But if you just state your research objectives to be very loaded in terms of they are still very detailed and very abstract, what happens is that somebody in trying to write a research question, you have to break the research objective into sub-questions to be able to address the objective. In other words, what we are trying to say is that when we look at your research objectives, we should have a relationship with your research questions. We should have a relationship with the research questions. Okay. Now, please, some supervisors don't believe in objectives. They believe in only questions. It happens. So they'll have a purpose. They'll go straight to the questions because they think that the questions matter more than the objective, or the kind of scientific paradigm they come from. They don't see objectives as what's needed. They see it as questions and what's needed. But let me just advise you that as of now, you don't know your supervisor. So just go with objectives and questions and let them be related to each other. So you have, if you look at the objectives here, to explore the potential benefits of using social media in the Mexican government or in government. The next one is the corresponding question that will address the objective. What are the potential benefits of social media in the government? To explore the main risks, what are the main risks? To explore the strategic guidelines, what are the strategic guidelines? So you see that there is a relationship between the objective and then the question. You see there's a relationship between the objective and the question. Okay. So you end up realizing that the research objectives and the questions have got a relationship. Now, how do you determine research questions and objectives? We said that the research question itself is an interrogated objective. So if you know how to do questions very well, you can apply that same way to formulate your research objectives. So every time you are doing a research question or objective, first of all, the question you should ask yourself is that, are the objectives clear or are the questions clear? Research questions must be clear as possible to offer direction. Number two, are they focused? Research questions should have a scope. Remember, I was just telling you, should have a scope. Your research question should have a scope, or research objective should have a scope. If your objective doesn't have a scope, then your question will not have a scope. Now, is your research question relatively complex or objectives relatively complex? What does it mean? Your questions and your objectives should not be easily answered by yes or no answers or easily found facts. Like if I Google, it should require some level of analysis and of getting your hands dirty into data collection and analyzing before an answer can come. If it doesn't entail that, then your answer exists already. So why are you even doing the research? If we had the answers for coronavirus, do you think that we'll be doing all this research that we are carrying out? Because we don't have the answer, and the answer is the question itself is very complex. We are still in the lab. So your research question, for it to be a very good question for the research process, should be relatively complex. That requires you to go and collect data. That requires you to go and read literature. That requires you to go and engage the literature with the data you have collected. If the research question is not complex enough, and objectives are not complex enough, and you can answer them by just sitting down and looking at just newspapers and what people are saying online, then it is wrong. It is not, it's a flawed research question or objective. It has not got the depth of complexity so that it can be able to warrant itself as a question or objective. Is that understood? Okay, so let's look at examples. I don't want to just say it. I want to use real examples to explain that. Okay, so the first one, all research questions and objectives, good ones, should have clarity. When your research question has clarity, that means that your research objective had clarity. So the two of them have to have clarity. Otherwise, they cannot be formulated. What do you mean by clarity? The unclear versions like to examine why social networking websites are harmful, or why are social networking websites harmful. Now, when you state a statement, when you put a statement like that, the reason why we say it's unclear is because you have started the study by actually having a position. Social networking websites are harmful. Number two, you didn't tell us what kind of harm you have mentioned. Number three, we don't even know whether the harm has been proven or not proven. So the clearer version should at least tell us, take a position that will help us explore the harm or the type of harm that is occurring and where is it occurring. You see, that is better. How are online users? Who are the target? Because there are different types of users too. So who are the targets? How are online users experiencing or addressing privacy issues, the type of harm, on social networking websites, such as MySpace and Facebook? Now, setting the two of them is necessary because now social networking websites are quite voluminous. There is Snapchat, TikTok, there is, some have come and gone, High Five and all those ones have come and gone, Photo Bucket, so many of them. So if you just go and just say that social networking sites, which of them are you referring to? Which of them are you referring to? It is good that even if you don't state what you are referring to in your question, state it in your purpose so that you can know that in relation to your purpose, you are referring to these particular types of social networking websites. Some students like to leave it vague. And then it leads us to start asking ourselves, because privacy issues on Twitter is different from privacy issues on social networking websites like Facebook. Even privacy issues on YouTube is very different from privacy issues on Facebook. Similarly, privacy issues on messaging, social messaging platforms like WhatsApp is very different from the privacy issues on Facebook. So please be very careful on how you state your questions. The unclear version doesn't specify which social networking websites or suggest the kind of harm. So at least one of them should be done. It assumes that the harm is proven or accepted. The clearer version specifies the websites, the type of harm, and who the harm is harming, or who the issue is harming, sorry. A strong research question or objective should never leave room for ambiguity or for interpretation. And this means that your research objectives and your research problems should also have a very good relationship so that they can have an intimacy in what we are discussing. And then the relationship can be clear. Okay. Now, a good research objective or question should have focus. An unfocused one can be what's the effect on the environment from global warming? Now, these questions are very broad. That's why we mean that we need focus and the scope. It's very broad, and it could take a textbook to answer it. You may end up writing a textbook before you finish answering it. But if you say, how is glacier melting affecting penguins in Antarctica? You are now telling us what you want to do by narrowing to a specific course, a specific place, and a specific group. Now, if you do the first one, you have left it open for interpretation. Who is in the environment? Is it the animals? Is it the people? Is it equipment? Is it even plants? The environment, the constituents of the environment is very, very broad. So which of the aspects of the environment are you intending to do? Please, it doesn't mean that in the beginning you cannot have this question. You can have this question in mind. But as you do the research problem, note that which aspect of the environment has received study and which aspect has not received study. So that when you are writing your research objectives and questions, you narrow down on what you want to do. So it may be good for you to start with an unfocused one in the beginning, in your mind, on your piece of paper as tentative question. As you read the literature, you should learn to focus. As you read the literature, you should learn to focus. Okay, so there's a question that comes here. Please, today I'm going to give an award to this lady. Please, what's the difference between introduction and background in the research proposal? And again, I have heard of a rationale of study. Oh, please, there is nothing like introduction. If you look, I think you missed our beginning. This is one of the reasons why I wait for all of you to come. You're taking us all back. Look at it. The introduction consists of your research background, problem, and purpose. You can have it as subsections. Research rationale is the same as the research problem. Thank you very much. And the statement of the problem is the same. Let me explain something. All these technologies you are using is about the universities that you go to and the universities and the works that you read. Technically, the statement of the problem can be the same as research problem. But in some supervisors, listen carefully, in some supervisors, what they mean by statement of the problem is like where you state the problem as you see it in industry. And I usually call it the context of the problem, which you can also put in your research background. Not as a subset, you can explain it. Like by pointing out that these are the issues happening in industry. So if you look at my book and you go and read it, I actually write that you can have a subsection in your research problem, on your research proposal called the context of the problem, which actually is the same as the statement of the problem. But please, I'm just saying this humbly. It's all about the school of thought of different authors. Some supervisors say statement of the problem and it's the same as the research problem. Some say that statement of the problem is not the same. In their view, statement of the problem is just one statement that describes the problem in a nutshell. I would advise you that whatever work you are doing, we want your research problem and research background. Don't get turned into these technologies and not end up doing a good work. Because if you state your problem without referencing literature, you are going to still have problems. It's very, very interesting. You state your problem without referencing literature, still going to still have problems. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that if you state your research problem and don't refer to literature, you are going to be questioning that where is this coming from? Okay. Now let's continue. Okay, so we mentioned that you should have focus and clarity. So focus means that you should narrow it down. The focus version narrows down to a specific course and a specific place and a specific group. When in doubt, make the research question objective narrow and focus as possible. Yeah, you have seen that it's on the slide. Okay. Now, good research questions also have some relative complexity. Too simple. How are doctors addressing diabetes in US? If you Google this one, you have a lot of answers. Okay. And you have a lot of them without any analysis, you can end up finishing it. But the second one involves two. It's provoking, and it also requires some significant investigation and evaluation. We cannot advise you, I will not advise you to state a research question or paper or a research question or objective that does not engage you into investigation and evaluation, and it's not thought-provoking, and you can just answer by factual sentences. No, don't do that. What are the common traits of those suffering from diabetes in America? And how are the commonalities how can these commonalities be used to aid the medical community in the prevention of the disease? So you see this one, somebody may even split it into two different questions. Anyway, but let me just point out that sometimes some students' research questions are weak on their own, but if they combine them to question two, and three, like if you look at all the questions together, it comes to a very comprehensive whole. So you have to think about that one when you're writing your research questions. Please don't go and ask a research question like to investigate the recommendations for making the company better, or to examine the recommendations, or to identify recommendation. Don't do that. Recommendations are expected of you at the end of your work when you present your findings. So it's a given. Don't put recommendations as part of your research questions or objectives. No, don't do that. That's one of the reasons why sometimes some of you have about 4 or 5 research questions, because everything you want to make it an objective, everything you think about, to investigate the challenges, to examine the problems, to examine the issues, all of them, challenges, issues, problems, they are all the same words you are using in different ways. So that is one of the reasons why I say read academic papers. Look at how they state out the research questions and research objectives there. Read past long essays supervised by the supervisor that you are going to be put under or assigned to. And make sure that the one that you are reading is works that are coming from the top-notch students, not any work that the person got 60 over 100 and you are reading. If you read those ones, then look for the wrong ways, look for errors. Don't be looking for the right ways to do it. The right way to do it is look for the students who are getting 75 and above. You can see good works, 75, 80, 81. See the very, very good works that students have done. Okay. Prof, this format for UG, this is a format for me in the context, because we are all UG students. The context of the problem, I'm just telling you that it can help. You see, there's nothing like perfect format for UG. Your supervisor will tell you what he's looking out for, but the format I'm giving you is the generic approach to it. But as you are doing, your supervisor will advise you what you want. That is why I say look at the examine the works that your previous students have done. Oh, Joseph, nobody says starting a research question with why makes it unfocused. No, nobody said that. Oh, nobody said that. Nobody said that. Nobody said. Stop taking statements. I didn't even say anything like that. Class, did I say that? If you see an example, does not mean that you have to make oh. It's nothing like that. I was the same person who told you that why questions are asked. Why questions are asked, how questions, especially for descriptive and explanatory studies, you get why questions coming up. In fact, I've seen somebody's PhD. The first question why do firms adopt this type of technologies in Africa or in developing countries? And the second question asks, what factors influence the adoption of these things? So it's okay. Ask yourself, the objective you have written there, which gap is it addressing? Answer that one first before you look at the wording. When you look at the gap it's addressing, the wording will become easier for you. But if it's not addressing any gap and it's just being stated anyhow, it will not have a scope. If it's addressing a gap, it will have a scope. It will have a definition, it will have a purpose. Okay. So please look at the gaps your objectives and questions are addressing and see the gap is addressing. If it is clear and the gap is clear, it's okay. You see, let me explain something to you. When you have a statement like, what is the effect of the environment on global warming? You are trying to say that the literature has never told us any effect of the environment on global warming, which is not true. But if you look into it, you realize that maybe when it comes to Antarctica, when it comes to Ghana, when it comes to penguins, and it comes to glacial melting, the three have not been put together. That is what we mean. So the same question could have been, what is the effect of glacial melting affecting, this one says how, okay, what's the effect of glacial melting on penguins in Antarctica? It could have been what? But when a person puts how, then he's looking that you want the descriptive process. When the person puts what, he's trying to tell us the type of effects. When the person puts how, tell us how the type of effects and how it occurs. That is what a how question means, what it means. So if you want to know this class, clap for yourself. I'm clapping for you. You are making me enjoy teaching. How will tell us more than just describing or naming, putting labels. How will tell you of a process. So when somebody say, how is glacial melting? Then meaning that he has mentioned the name of the effect. And he's telling you how it occurs. So what if the study, I'm just hearing, what if we don't know the effects that is there? So like, what is the effect of bushfire on farms in Konongo in Ghana? Good. So it looks like there's the effect of bushfire in Mozambique and in South Africa and in Kenya is known. But the one in Ghana, we have not studied it. Because we have not studied it, we don't want to choose any of the effects. We can review the literature and say that in bushfire can destroy farms, it can destroy this, can destroy that, it can affect livelihoods. So, but for Konongo, we have not done the study in Konongo before. So we leave the yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I always use I like using the Friday video on Sakai. So we will leave the effect vague and rather discuss it in the research problem so that when we go into the literature, when we go to the field, we look at, because it's exploratory, we look at all the type of effects of bushfire on Konongo or on let's say Agbozome or on maybe a particular town which you have never studied before. But bushfire is not a new study. It has been studied already. The effects are known. But when we combine bushfire and the town you have selected, we don't know. Because of that, you are allowed to use the word effect. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? You're allowed to use the word effect. However, if that town, people have done studies on Agbozome already. People have done studies on, let's say, this particular Ghana already, and have pointed out in Ghana, the effect of bushfire is loss of livelihoods, loss of income, and that it has told you something already. So the exploratory part has been done already. Now you need to go to the descriptive part and ask yourself, how is it affecting them? So that's why I told you earlier that there's a difference between the exploratory and then the descriptive and then the explanatory. So note, what are you trying to do in your work? Are you trying to explore when there is nothing already? Or are you trying to take what exists already and go further and describe? Or are you trying to take what exists already and has been described already and go further and explain? If you don't know these things, you will be using the word how, what, and why without understanding why you are using them. In other words, I'm also not saying that all house studies are descriptive. You can have a house study which is exploratory, but most of the what studies start from exploratory and can also be descriptive. Note what you are doing, and that's why reading the literature is important. Most of you don't read the literature, so you just state the thing how you feel about it. You see, look at this question. Look at the example that I was telling you. I will not even go far. Look at this one. What are the common traits, exploratory, of those suffering from diabetes? Then going down, when you are now understand the common traits, now you're going to, how can this commonality be used? You see, now he's going to the next level. How can it be used? Now, the entire study could be exploratory, but the second question is how, which is going to describe how it can be used. Okay, thank you very much. So let's look at it one example. Research purpose and objectives again. The purpose of the study is to investigate the high attitudes of high school students to mandated track testing programs in Kwewu Senior High School. The objectives are stated, and then the related questions are also outlined. Okay. The next part of I want to finish the way your class is on fire. Let me finish the research proposal with you so that you can go ahead and just write it. Just the research proposal. For the other classes, I think I reached only the Saturday class. I only reached the literature review, but I'll continue. Monday, I continue. So the literature review section, we just have we can finish in the next 30 minutes. And then we go. Okay, so literature review or relevant literature section of your research proposal aims to showcase to the supervisor who is going to read your work the concepts you are going to use in your work and the explanation of the concepts. And if there's a theoretical approach a model you are going to mention it. So this is where, if there's a model you know about that you want to use for your work, tentatively you can describe it in a brief way here. Mention the name of the theory, mention the name of the concepts. It doesn't mean that will be the final. You are putting it there to get feedback from your supervisor. You are putting it there to get feedback from your supervisor. So your supervisor can point you to the right direction. Okay. So as a general rule of thumb, you can use this section to introduce the relevant literature you need to read or review for your research. Also explain the key concepts in the research and possible factors or issues to be explored. If a research framework has been identified, you can mention it. This is a good starting point. And that is why it's good to categorize your literature and identify your keywords in the research. Okay. So let's look at an example. So this guy is writing on mobiles and micro trading. He said this study investigates the impact. So he starts by the purpose of the study, reminding you of the purpose of the study. This study investigates. Now you see the word he's using investigate, not examine, determine. He says investigates. Okay, so I'm just letting you know. Or this study examines the impact of mobile phones or micro trading activities of women traders in Ghana. But it's an exploratory study, but you can still use the word investigate or examine or determine. To obtain answers to this objective. Hey, Martin, I went to work there. I'm not from there. Okay. To obtain answers to this objective, 4 strands of literature will be reviewed. 4 strands of literature will be reviewed. The first strand will be to explore the concept of trading or commerce from the perspective of transaction cost theory. Transaction cost theory is arguably the most commonly used theory in studying the issues relating to assessment of the impact of technology or ICTs on commerce and trade. Okay. The study will examine transaction costs are described as the cost of running a system. The study will examine the impact of mobile phones on the costs involved in micro trading. The second and third strands of literature. So this one is about the categories of literature you are reading, and then give it. So if you're using, if your work is on poverty or unemployment, what definition of poverty are you using? What definition of unemployment are you using? And what concepts about these two are you going to use to do the discussions? Okay. The second and third strands of the literature review will review literature on the features of mobile phones and benefits of using mobile phones in reducing the cost of trading. The fourth strand of literature. So in a nutshell, you are going to tell us the literature you are going to cover and why it matters, and what key definitions you have assumed for your work. Okay, and what key concepts are going to be used in your work? The first strand of literature will examine the impact of mobile phones generated by virtue of benefits. Mobile phones are conceptualized to have three effects on adopters: incremental or amplification, transformational, and production. These effects will be used to analyze the impact of mobile phones on trade. So you see, I've presented two models. One model on the impact part, another model on the cost part and the benefits part. One on transaction cost theory is looking at the impact of mobiles on the cost issues. The other one is the effect on the adopters. The effect on the adopters. Okay. Yes, Sakite, that is the actual chapter called literature review. Your actual chapter called literature review, you break it into sub-themes. Remember I told you about how to write according to themes. According to themes. Your actual chapter called literature review, you're going to break it into sub-themes. So it's possible. Okay. But and here too, you can do some things if you want to, but this is just a short section embedded in your research proposal. Research proposal itself is about 2,000 or 3,000 words. So this is just a subsection. So you are just giving us key issues you'll be looking into. Okay. So from there, you go to the research methodology. What method do you intend to use for your research? What method? Remember, when your research gets accepted, this will move to go to your methodology chapter to become your actual core methodology. Okay. Okay, so what you have here, identify the type of study you are going to carry out. What are you going to do? Whether you are going to do quantitative or qualitative or mixed methods? What's your unit of analysis? Are you focusing on individuals, organizations, industry, or country? Is that the scope of your work? What's this research strategy are you going to apply? When you chose quantitative, are you going to do survey? When you chose qualitative, are you going to do ethnography or case study? Or are you going to do phenomenology? There are different types of quantitative approaches. Most often in a business school, it's case study that we use. And the quantitative one to uses survey. Where will data be collected and what methods will be used to look at the data? Study population, the primary data you use, and how you collect the data, how many questionnaires you intend to administer, and the secondary data you intend to use. So so this is about gender differences in e-banking adoption. This is what somebody is writing on. So he says that the study will use a quantitative approach to study or to examine the gender differences in the adoption of e-banking services among university students. The study population are students in the University of Ghana Business School. Now you have to justify why you're choosing them. So he says that a study by Tex in 2009 found that students enrolled in finance and accounting programs are more likely to adopt e-banking services. A survey will be carried out on a sample selected from students in the third and fourth year. We would like you to let us know the type of sampling approach you use. So when I teach you sampling, you can apply it in writing your research, the sampling approach you are writing your research proposal. A questionnaire concerning the adoption and use of e-banking services will be administered to 150 students. The study will also examine statistics of student banking activities from campus banks. So the campus banks activities is more related to the secondary data. And the first one is the one on collecting from 150 students is related to the primary data. But those of you who do quantitative studies, there's a way of establishing your population size. And you have to read up on that. I am not teaching quantitative studies here. So if you want to use, if the population is about 10,000, how do you choose a sample that will best fit your work? So there's a sample size calculation formula that you can actually use. And sometimes you find them in some of the long essay students actually write and they do quantitative work. Qualitative doesn't focus on that kind of sample size estimation. Then significance of research. So significance of research tells us the potential benefits of the research when we finish your work. What are the potential implications of your research? So we will look at it in three dimensions or strands. One being the research. What's the implication to researchers? What are the implications to managers and practitioners? What are the implications to policymakers? So you have to write it in that. If I do this research, how will it benefit current research? If I do this research, how will it benefit practitioners who are in this area of study and who are this area of work? And if I do this work, how will policymakers Now, it's not every study that will influence policymakers. So don't jump ship and then try to create that your work can inform policymaking when it cannot do that. Okay, your question that you're asking me privately, and the students, okay, I don't know whether I should answer it because the way I've asked it, I don't know whether it's okay. So your research question should be informed by what you are doing. If you are doing exploratory study, you can still use. You see, the fact that somebody is doing exploratory study does not mean the person cannot use what, how, and why. Exploratory is about the phenomenon you are studying. Descriptive is about the phenomenon you are studying. Explanatory is about the phenomenon you are studying. Understand the phenomenon you are studying, whether the phenomenon itself has a maturity in the context you are studying it, so that you can know whether you are doing exploratory or descriptive or you are doing explanatory. Then when you have determined that, you can then put the right prefixes to it, whether what or how or why. Because I can have a how question, but it's still exploratory because I'm trying to explore and we don't have that knowledge. We don't have that knowledge and nobody has done research in that area. So I'm still trying to explore. How does this thing even occur? If you go back to my slides, you see that I have a table that was showing the type of questions people even ask in the different type of studies, in the different types of studies. Okay. Please, let me just point out these things carefully and then come back to what we are doing. Some of you, it seems that you don't realize that when we are teaching you, all that we teach is interrelated. So I just want to show you something here. Kindly forgive me, class. Look at this slide. Exploratory research. Key variables are not defined. Quality of the service is declining and we don't know why. This question is now a why question, but it's exploratory. Would people be interested in our view of the product? This is also a why or what question. How important is business process reengineering as a strategy? This is also a how question, but it's exploratory. It is not the why, the what, and the how that defines it. It is more about what you are studying, the phenomenon you are studying. Please, I'm saying it for the last time. I won't repeat this again. Descriptive research, the key variables are defined. What have been the trends in organizational downsizing over the past 10 years? Why did last year's product record have impact on the company's share price? So describe why it had it. Has average merger rate for a financial institution increased in the past decade? Explanatory, key variables and key relationships are defined. Which of the two training programs is more effective for reducing labor turnover? This is causality. Can I predict the value of energy stocks if I know the current dividends and growth rates of dividends? Do buyers prefer product in a new package? Explanatory. So do you see the type of questions that people are asking? It's not about the what or the why. What are you studying? Are the variables well defined? Are you exploring the relationships between the variables? They are explanatory. If the variables are not well defined for the given context, you may be exploring that these variables apply here. Please. It's about how you look at the issue and how you define the degree of problem definition. What you do in your research problem will end up letting us know whether you are going descriptive, exploratory, or explanatory. Savvy? Okay. Thank you very, very much. Go back, all of you, and be looking at our slides. The things I teach you, they are related. They are related. They are related. They are related. Okay. Implications to research. How does it inform research area? How does you... Oh, Madam Mahama Shadow, you can create, in fact, we expect you to create your research questions based on the gaps. In fact, your research objectives first, based on the gaps. So the purpose will be a summary. The research objectives should be based on the gaps, and that means that the questions will also be based on the gaps. I mentioned that earlier, that even at a PhD level, when you state your research objective, we tell you that which of the gaps is it addressing. Okay, and implication to practice, implication to policy. Okay, so what's happening here? The significance of so this is about e-banking, rural bank. Sorry that most of the studies I'm using here are EE now. Okay, the significance of the study can be viewed along, but this is actually coming from somebody's thesis. The significance of the study can be viewed along 3 strands. Research, practice, and policy. Concerning research significance, this study goes beyond current research on e-banking rural banks by examining the strategies for implementing and integrating e-banking technologies. Now he's telling you the gap that he saw in the research, that is why he told you that you want to do this work. So what gap are you addressing in the research? What gap? So he said that this study goes beyond current research. The current research in e-banking does not look at strategies. So you are going to do that. So he says that literature on strategic perspective of e-banking rural bank is arguably non-existent in Ghana. In Ghana, and perhaps it spreads to the West African region. So by doing this work, he's contributing new knowledge on strategic perspective of e-banking in Ghana and in West Africa. Sabi? Okay. Concerning the significance to practice, the study will provide guidelines to other rural banks on the factors that influence e-banking adoption and strategic options to address challenges in managing and sustaining e-banking applications. Your work is going to look at how e-banking is deployed in rural banks. So if you look at it in even 2 rural banks, whatever you gain can be knowledge that can help the industry. That's what he's trying to say. So this will be very helpful for the ARB Apex Bank and to add to rural banks in this network. ARB Apex Bank is a kind of a meta bank that is supposed to oversee or regulate the computerization and some of the management activities of rural banks. So when you do a study like this, ARB Apex Bank will be very happy that you have done that study. And actually, the guy who did this study is one of the I think he's the COO, Chief Operations Officer. I think, yeah. He's one of the CEOs of the ARB Apex Bank. The time he did it, he was not the CEO. Now he thinks the CEO. Okay. Concerning the significance to policy, the study and I supervised him, that's right. The study will provide feedback on policies driving computerization of rural banks, which is critical to the operations of the financier. Okay, so the computerization of rural banks in Ghana is being done by Millennium Challenge Corporation. So anybody who does a study on the benefits of this computerization and the outcome and how it was done will end up bringing knowledge that will be beneficial to the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the government of Ghana, and other donors who are interested in supporting ICT integration in rural banks. These contributions to policy and practice will become necessary in the development of more advanced and complex functionalities for rural banks, including internet banking and mobile banking. Perfect. So relate your significance of your study to a question like, if I don't do this work, how will researchers lose? If I don't do this work, what will practitioners lose? If I don't do this work, what will policymakers lose? Okay. So let's look at the research limitations. The research limitation tells us the influences of the study that you cannot control as a researcher. They are beyond the control of the researcher, and they are not actually dictated by the external influence that happen and out of the control of the researcher. One can be time available for the study. Another one can be the fact that people don't even respond to your questions. When you send your questionnaire, they don't even return it to you. You can't control that one. The geographic locations of your data sources, you can't control that one. They can be dispersed across the country. So because of that, it can constrain you to choose the ones which are closer to you. So when we say limitations, there are things that constrain, things concerning about the issues concerning the study that constrain the choices the researcher has. So the researcher is actually pushed to make a choice because these things are limiting him to make a particular choice. The options are few because of the conditions that are coming, the nature of analysis, the nature of self-reporting, instruments you have used, the sample. The sample is very, very interesting. For example, if your study has found a gap among females concerning an issue, by the time you finish, your study is already limited to females. So future studies can also look at another issue looking at males. If your study is located, you to study it in Ghana, future studies can look at it in other developing countries in West Africa. So this is what we are trying to say, that what are the studies focus limit you to do? What does it limit you to do? Then you also have delimitations. Delimitations are not constraints set by the study. They are constraints that are coming from the choices the researcher has made himself. Choices. He had the option of doing this and this, and he chose something, and that kind of limits the study. So we call it delimitations. Limitations and constraints set by the author, because they are describe the boundaries you have set for the study, and those boundaries kind of limit you. So we call them delimitations. Please, once again, I'm saying this again. Listen carefully, everybody. Pause and listen carefully. Your supervisors will be asking you for research limitations. Most of them will never ask you for delimitations. But when you write it, you may end up combining the delimitations and the limitations. You understand what I said? Your supervisors will ask you for limitations, but most often you end up writing both limitations and delimitations in one piece of writing. So, Kuma, yes, even though your research questions are stated, objectives are stated clearly, you are supposed to state your research questions. Unless your supervisor doesn't believe in one of them. Some supervisors don't believe in questions, they like objectives. Others also don't believe in questions, objectives, they like questions. But generically, your objectives will be there, your questions will be there. So go with the generic one and be safe, especially if you are going to apply to an outside university. The sample size of 50 computerized, so this is about limitations in a study on e-banking rural banks. A sample size of 50 computerized rural and community banks will be selected out of the 97 based on proximity for ease of data collection and time constraint for the study. The study is constrained by time, and then the data collection is also constrained by location of the 97 rural banks. So the student is saying that he will choose only 50. This one is a limitation, not because he wanted to do 50, because they are not close to him. And because they are not close to him, he's going to end up doing only 50, so that he can be able to reach out to them easily. The study will not cover the use of electronic channels such as ATM and point of sale, mobile phone and internet, since these channels have not been deployed in the bank. At the time the student was doing this study, the rural banks that he was going to study didn't have ATM, didn't have point of sale, mobile phone banking functionalities, and internet banking. So because they didn't exist, he couldn't study it. That is not his fault. It's a constraint put in by the study itself. So that is a limitation. Now, it will only focus on the computerization project under the mandate of Arabic IPS Bank. This is where it gets tricky. Now, I say it will only focus. It's like a choice you are making. Now, when you say you to only focus, that means that there could be opportunity for you to focus on something else. So this is a delimitation, because you see, not all the banks are using Arabic IPS Bank for their computerization. Some of the banks went to Nigerian companies and then bought their own software and came to install it and then computerize their branches. They didn't use Arabic IPS Bank. So in that scenario, this particular student is saying that he is going to focus on only the ones that are being mandated by Arabic IPS Bank for computerization. Philip, it looks like what you are saying is true. I don't want to delve into it, but it looks like what you say. If I don't answer it, you still not get confused. So it's okay. Your population is the 97. Your sample is the 50. You are confused. You are mixing the two. The population is the 97. The sample is 50. So your limitation can actually be informed, can actually dictate your sample rather, not the population. Also, there's a possibility that some of the respondents may not return the questionnaire since it will touch on financial and operational performance issues before and after computerization. This is a limitation because you can't control whether people will respond, bring their questionnaire back or not. The next one, The study will focus more on banks than their customers in assessing the challenges and prospects of the project. Now you are choosing banks over their customers. You're not going to interview customers. So you are making a choice. It's a delimitation. But all of them will be written as limitations. Okay. Now, Prof, you said that qualitative research doesn't have a formula for finding sample size. How will you know if the sample size is relevant? When we get to sampling, you understand that. Qualitative researchers look out for creating people and finding members of a sample or members to form a sample that can give a rich explanation of what occurred. You're not looking for the representativeness of the sample size numerically or statistically. You're looking for what can information they can get to a point of saturation. So there's something we call data saturation. As you collect the data, get to a point where nobody is telling you anything new. It's almost the same thing they have been telling you all the time. Okay. So the next one you do is project schedule. Project schedule will tell us the outline of your chapters and then when you intend to finish them. So it looks like this: chapter 1, I'll finish on this, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8. Most often you have about 6 chapters or 7 chapters for an MBA program. Some lectures have 5 chapters. Depends on the study you are doing. What our advice is, remember to include your supervisors meetings. You can put it there, but not put a time on there. And then factor in the revisions you have to do on the previous chapters. And factor in the schedule of the activities, like the data collection time, the analysis time. So this is just a snapshot to guide you. Why is this important? So that if you know you are going to get married, you let your supervisor know that in July you will not be available. That's what I'm trying to say as an example. But it's important that we know what you are committing to the period. So the supervisor can know how he's going to manage his time. Some supervisors during the summer travel for conferences. So if you choose not to do your work and wait till summertime and bring everything to him, you may not find the person. You may not find the supervisor. Okay. Yes, your limitation can be based on can become the basis for future research. And that's why we call it future research directions. I'll talk about that when I'm talking about conclusion. Usually by the time you finish the study, your limitations will move to the concluding chapter. Then the limitations of the study then become a point for pointing out a departure for future study. So because your study looked at this only, future studies can look at that. Yeah. So the next one has to do with, please, we don't want a lazy approach like this. Christmas, I write my research proposal, literature review, complete my literature review, and then do my data collection. February, complete the data collection, analyze the data, write the dissertation plan, begin the first draft, complete the first draft, then meet the supervisor after 3 months. Are you supervising yourself or the supervisor is the one supervising you? Don't go and hide and meet after 3 months. If you do this, your supervisor will not even approve your proposal. So don't do this one. You end up hiding and not showing up. The last part has to do a chapter outline. That will tell us what you do in each chapter. So chapter 1 will do the research background, research problem, purpose, objectives, questions, significance, scope and limitation of the research, and then chapter synopsis. Chapter 2 will focus on the literature review and the research framework. Chapter 3 will look at the context of study. Some people do context of study. Why? Because they want to give an overview of the sector they are trying to do the work in and the profile of the case organization or the institution that have been selected. Chapter 4 deals with the methodological approaches that highlight the study area, population, sampling techniques, sample size, data collection instrument, method, data processing, mode of analysis, variables, and ethical considerations. Wow. Chapter 5 entails data presentation, analysis, and discussion. Chapter 6 look at the summary, conclusion, and recommendations. Okay. And then that is it. Then you have finished and bring your references. Then you have finished your research proposal. So that's what we expect you to do. Just on time, We just finished on time. Okay, now let me go to Sakai and then show you something else from Sakai. Whoa. Okay. Hmm. Okay, so let me go and get Sakai and then. Oh, wow, 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 wow. Secretary is the supervisor. The supervisor is the one who will advise you. Some supervisors like doing that, so it's not a problem. Everything is up to you and your supervisor. So please, all the things I'm teaching you is the generic one, but your supervisor can change the structure of the long lesson based on the topic you are doing, and you may consider it to be more wise to do so. I don't. I may not be there, but he is the one there. So listen to your supervisor.